There we go. Here we go. 1, 2, live there. Go. I think it's always so crazy going live onto Instagram. Never works right away. I'll tell you, for people who watch this thing. All right. And just like that, we are live on all the apps, everybody. Just so you know, we're doing this live every single day. So try to give some reactions and stuff that is happening within the market. And today's story is coming from Anthony behind the camera. Big news in the world of HVAC. If you know anything about my company, we work with HVAC contractors and roofers across the country. So when I see any kind of news that makes the national landscape in something like this, I always want to make sure that we try to cover it right here. For those of you who are not aware, there are 7 basic manufacturers within the HVAC industry. And these people, they run it all. So that air conditioner that you have in your home, it's made by one of the big 7. And those big 7 are going to include some of the names that you probably already know. I'll kind of list out some of them that we have right here. But let's see here. Carrier, Trane, Daikin, Lennox, you know the whole names. And these individuals right here, here's what basically happened. And it's kind of crazy. I think that people are going to have mixed feelings about it. I want you to pretend that you own a lemonade stand. And in owning that lemonade stand, you have, I don't know, some competitors on your street who own a lemonade stand too. Normally, you are trying to have the best price lemonade so that you would be able to put those other people out of business. But what if all 4 of you that are on the same street selling the same lemonade got together and got an app, and you all said that on that app, you were going to share your prices of what you were going to sell lemonade for that day? And so each of you would get a printout, ever look at it in real time. And if one person raised their prices 10 cents, you could raise your prices 10 cents, and you would never have to speak to one another, collude, or meet in some back room somewhere and shake hands and say, we'll agree that we're all going to be in this together. None of that had to happen at all. That's basically exactly what happened, or what this lawsuit alleges happened in the HVAC world. I'm not going to go into all the details and the names, but there's a big organization within the HVAC world, the kind of a national organization. That organization came out with an app. And who could use that app but only the people that were members of this organization, i.e. the manufacturers of all these HVAC units out there, the air conditioning units. And so these companies, they all got together on this app and started sharing their price data, how much they were making, what they were selling it for, their cost. They were all sharing it with one another openly. They were sharing it. And so what was inevitably happening is, as we go from 2020 on, prices were being increased by one manufacturer, and then just a couple weeks later, prices would increase on another, and then another, and all of them would just continue to go up. And what this lawsuit did is it took into account 20 factors that normally would factor into price increases within an industry like HVAC. And in discussing or looking at those price increases, looking at those factors, it came out and said that prices increased 8% more than what they should have, given the factors of cost and manufacturing, given the cost of labor or copper or just raw materials. The prices went up way too much, way higher than what they would have. And when they dived into why, they looked at this app where all of these 7 manufacturers were in fact sharing information. And then now we have to look at, was that illegal? Was it illegal for these manufacturers to all be a part of the same, let's call it a networking group, if you want to look at it that way? And if by being a part of this national organization, they all shared their data, were they therefore using that data to artificially inflate prices for the industry? Now, if you're them, you could look at it and say, well, listen, a lot more people were at home during COVID in 2020 when they're alleging that this started. There was a lot more need for air conditioning at that time, people paying attention to their systems. It wasn't us. It was a sign of the times. And you know what? It's real easy to be Monday morning quarterbacking this thing from 2026 back to what we were doing back then. So there are 2 sides to this right now. I want to dive into the article with you, though, because this affects so many people. It affects the people that are installing AC units. It affects homeowners who rely on this stuff. It affects how much money it costs to repair these units. If what's happening is these big manufacturers are getting together and just saying, we're just going to all stick in this together, and we're all going to slowly raise our rates, and every one of us are going to make money at the expense of American homeowners, American small business. Let's dive into the article right now. So this is coming to us right now from, here we go. Title of the article, if you want to read this thing, is HVAC manufacturers sued for conspiracy to inflate prices. I just want to give you a brief overview of exactly what this thing is looking at. The 7 major U.S. HVAC manufacturers conspired to raise and keep prices of their commercial and residential products higher after the pandemic, a lawsuit filed in a federal district court in Michigan alleges. Now, here's what happened, all right? It started back in 2020. They say it went up about 8% more than what it should have based on those 20 variables. This defendant, or I'm sorry, the prosecution, although these defendants offered many excuses for the conspiracy, such as cost increases from COVID-19, updated efficiency standards, and phase down of a word that I can't say, mandates by the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act of 2020, these were not justifications and unsupported actual data, lawyers for the plaintiff say on their website. The 7 companies all deny this entire thing. They control 90%, get that, folks, 90% of the residential and commercial HVAC market. There isn't anybody else except for these big 7 that are able to put an AC into your house. So the organization that they're looking at here is AHRI. Let's see if I can go back to this and figure out exactly what this is. The Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute. And they're the ones who came up with this app that all of these organizations decided that they were going to go ahead and join. All right. As we go down here, we look at it. Big news. Okay, there we go. Yeah, they're all denying it. They're all going to say okay, we do things with integrity. We would never do this. Yeah. Okay, all the normal things that big lawyers would say pending in litigation like this. What I want to explore with you, though, is this. If you have something like an organization where only people who are members can share the data, and if I am a part of that organization and my competitor is on the other side of it, and I'm able to see the exact prices in which my competitor is going to head and charge, you cannot tell me that somehow, some way, I would not look at that and then make an inference on what I'm going to do with my pricing. That would be ridiculous. I mean, now listen, before I go ahead and pot calling the kettle black here, before I go in and say I would never do that, I am smart enough to look at it and go, yeah, if I would have been, Carrier and I'm looking across the hall right there, I'm looking at my phone and it's going, yeah, they're raising prices 5%. Sure, I'll raise prices 5% myself too. And that's what I look at right now is there's no way in the world that these big companies were not looking at this data and then making judgments for themselves based on what the other person was doing. It's just human nature wouldn't allow you to do that. What I am surprised about is that this lawsuit did not come from one of the other manufacturers, because I would have thought, you think about this, the main 7, right? I mean, there are some of there's a little bit bigger than the others, but that means that all of them were on board with this. Every single one of these manufacturers, like, you know what? I'm not breaking rank. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick in this thing for as long as what we can. And we're just going to keep on raising these prices and we're all going to win. You would have thought there would have been a smaller one that somehow would have got gobbled up. They wouldn't have gotten screwed over in the deal. But that's actually not the case here. This is from the district court in Michigan. This is actually coming from an individual who wants this to be a class action suit against these carriers. And I'm going to tell you what, if they did conspire to do this, then they are guilty as they can be. And in which case, that's a whole other side of this thing to what happened to HVAC prices if they decide to go in and press forward with a class action lawsuit. Are we going to see where HVAC prices now are even going to skyrocket more, and we've given them an excuse in order to raise those prices? Now, I think back, in roofing, if you're a roofer out there and you follow the show, or any kind of industry, there's always a big couple players that are out there. Should these players just be able to, look at each other's data? No, they shouldn't be able to. But I will say this. If just because one person increases their prices and another person decides a couple months later to increase their prices, doesn't mean that there's collusion. All right. I'd be very interested to dive a little bit more into this, to look at those 20 factors in which they're saying affected the price, and then see from there, do I really believe that that was all that was playing a factor here? I just don't think that just because two manufacturers decide that they're going to raise their price at the same time doesn't necessarily mean that they're both doing something wrong or they're colluding with one another. Now, I have to admit that 8% over a course of a long time, over the course of 7 different manufacturers, is a lot of coincidence right there. But that coupled with the fact that we had a lot of things that were supply chain issues at that time, and there were some things that did happen in 2020 that made it more difficult to manufacture, or some other, let's say, some other hoops you had to jump through to manufacture a unit. I think this could go both ways. Do I think that they're going to be able to get a class action suit out of this? I don't think there's a chance in the world that that is going to happen. Now, I think they've got a real uphill battle in going in and showing that these companies colluded with one another through an app of a national organization, and that is what it caused these price increases to go up so much, 8% more than what they should have. I think more likely is that they're going to get probably a slap on the wrist, and these companies are going to probably look a little bit closer at how they share information in the future. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I really don't like competitors being a part of the same organization and being all friendly with one another. I never got that. Like in my business right here, I'm not going to show up to a media conference and go buddy with other media companies that are out there. I've never been that person. I've never been that person if I was playing sports that was going to walk up to the person I was about to play against. And even if they were friends of mine, I was going to be all buddy with them, shaking hands, dapping up and shit. I wasn't going to be that guy. I can't imagine if I had my competitor there, I'm not going to show up to a conference and just be all, man, let's go out to dinner, let's have drinks. You're my competitor. I want to crush you. In our media world here, I want to crush our competitors that we have. I want to put them out of business. And so for me, something like this just doesn't ring with me. I don't see it. I can never see myself doing something like this, but I can see how someone would get involved with it and then fall victim to the greed and the lack of competition if you were lazy and you just wanted to make money. And you're just like, man, listen, we all can just agree to just all shut our mouths and just keep the prices going. Then damn, we're going to go in and we're going to do this. So not for me, but who am I to judge when maybe you're talking about the difference between, a few $100 million in profit and, 8% more than that. Maybe you're looking at $25 million more that is in your pocket. And if you're that CEO, if you're that person who has a bonus dependent on something like that, and you're talking about bringing home maybe 2.3 versus 3.4 million a year, I think we'd all be a little bit, we should all be smart before we say that we want to do the exact same thing if given the opportunity right here. But not for me. I just look at it and I go, I can't imagine being too buddy with my competition. If I'm one of those 7, I'm doing anything I can to put those others out of business. Maybe they didn't feel that way. Maybe you had too much of the structure of how they were paid, and the compensation structure was just too tempting for them to do anything, which I can also understand that as well. I can see both sides here. They're definitely not going to get a class action against them. They're probably not even going to win this case, or they're probably not even going to lose this case against them right here. But anyways, it goes to show you never know what is going on behind the scenes with so many of these big companies. I'd hate to think this is happening in other industries right now, but I would imagine that it's happening more often than what we think that it is. I look at roofing, which people believe is a very fragmented and hostile industry. People who like a CertainTeed product don't like a TAMCO, which don't like a GAF, which don't like, whatever. But I think that if we step behind the scenes, I would be very interested to see if there is that much hostility between manufacturers in every industry that we think that there is. In HVAC, it's very apparent that that is not the case. If nothing else, you've got a bunch of people that are very friendly with one another. Even if they're not colluding with one another, it's clear that they are very friendly beyond something that's just competitors out there. So think about your own industry. You may think that these people don't like one another. You may think the biggest manufacturers or the biggest distributors, man, they really don't like the way the other one does business. But in reality, it may just be what's happening with HVAC. And these people are just colluding together, or at least friendly with one another enough to where they kept each other going and they kept the profits coming in. Let me know what you think. HVAC companies getting out there and being sued. Did they collude with one another? Did they raise the prices for homeowners? Let me tell you what, if you are somebody who has ever had to have an HVAC unit installed or replaced, you know it's basically like a new roof, all right? It's expensive, and the fact that it had become more expensive, maybe at the expense of the homeowners and maybe for them to make their own pad their own pockets. Anyways, to make more money, then that's sad to hear. We'll keep our eye on this one because I want to see if this actually goes through. I don't think there's a way in the world. There's too much money with the carriers, too much money with the manufacturers to lose here. I don't think it goes forward. They'll fight it. Maybe they settle out of court, something like that. Maybe something undisclosed amount, and we'll see how this one turns out. We appreciate Anthony giving us this story right here, talking about HVAC here. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much.